Hello, everyone. My name is Tegan Clary, and I head up the marketing team at Unchained Labs. I'll be your moderator today, and thanks for joining us. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To ask questions, all you need to do is click on the Q&A button in the Zoom navigation bar. It should be at the bottom or top of your screen. When you submit a question, try not to hit anonymous if you do want us to reach out to you and follow up with you on your question if we're not able to get to it. Kevin and I will get to as many as we can today. I'd like to now introduce Kevin Lance, our Director of Analytics Marketing at Unchained Labs. Hey, Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited about viscosity.
Me too. Today, Kevin will walk us through how to measure viscosity rapidly and easily on Honeybun, frankly, faster than anybody's ever been able to do it before. So I'm excited to hear about that, Kevin. He will get into the details about how Honeybun works. And we'll share some data generated with antibodies at various concentrations and temperatures in our lab. And now I'll hand it over to Kevin. Kevin, I'll be back and we'll do Q&A at the end. Okay, so take it away.
All right, sounds good. Hi, and everybody, I'm very excited to introduce you to Honeybun. So the main trend that we saw out there in the world for biologics and antibody therapeutics was a trend towards higher concentration. This is coming as companies more interested in doing injection-based medicine instead of infusion-based medicine, or just to get a more potent dose that can be injected into a person. Now, the problem with high concentration biologics is that when you increase the concentration, you increase the viscosity. And measuring that's critical to know how your drug is going to perform. If you're injecting this drug, then the ability to inject it, or the injectability, and the syringe ability, the ability to get it out of a vial, are two crucial parameters that you need to know. If you're working on formulation development, then viscosity can also be a measure to help screen for the best performers. And even if you're working on process development, then viscosity is a critical quality attribute to know before you go into any filtration steps like TFF or sterile filtration, or into your fill-finish process to make sure that you're going to get the results that you want. Now, the problem with viscosity data is that getting it is too slow. Current methods that are out there, old school techniques, use too much sample volume and really just leave you running one sample at a time. And what that means is it's going to take forever to get the data that you need. Even new school techniques that use lower sample volumes still are one sample at a time and have more complicated workflows where clogging and cleaning are now part of your process. We didn't want to do any of that, so we introduced Honeybun. Honeybun is designed to get you viscosity data as fast as possible for your biologic sample. It can run 1 to 10 samples at a time using only 40 microliters per sample, and then it gets that data from about 3 minutes of actual run inside of the instrument. Even if you have a 1 centipoise sample, those runs are going to be even faster, closer to 1 minute. Getting a sample set up is also one of the simplest and easiest instruments that we've ever designed, where you simply pipette it into the consumable and run through the quickest software, and you're ready to go. Let's talk about how that works. Okay, so the secret sauce inside of Honeybun is its consumable, the bun. The bun has 3 key features: an input well, where you're pipetting in that 40 microliters of sample; the microfluidic channel, where the whole sort of phenomenon that drives the Honeybun is happening, and we'll get into details there; and the output well that's just there to catch sample at the other end of the whole process. So the key to getting viscosity read on a bun is shown at the bottom, where each of these microfluidic channels is actually composed of 2 different sections: a smaller channel called the resistance channel, and a larger channel called the measurement channel. Now, the next slide dives into how those each play a key role in getting you viscosity data as fast as you can handle it. How this works is you would add your 40 microliters of sample into the input well, insert your chip inside of your bun inside of Honeybun, and compressed air or nitrogen is going to apply positive pressure to push your sample through the microfluidic channel. At that point, the smaller channel, the resistance channel, is going to resist flow. And then when the sample gets into the measurement channel, we're going to use a simple optical camera to detect how fast that flow is going. So that gives us an opportunity to resist flow and slow things down, and an opportunity to measure it with some simple optics and figure out what the volumetric flow rate is in milliliters per minute. Then the math is pretty simple and we'll take care of it all for you, where we divide the pressure that we know we're applying with the flow rate that we're getting from your sample, and then some terms around the geometry of those channels, and we get to the viscosity. Loading the sample on Honeybun is as easy as every other part of Honeybun. We simply slide it into the front just like a memory card on your computer. To actually set up the experiment, this is that incredibly quick software that I mentioned. So I like to say that you can go from walking up to the instrument to running samples in just 3 clicks. Logging in, changing your project name, and then selecting the samples that you want to run, hit start, and you're good to go. So if that's all you want to do, great, we'll give you some default sample names and run at a default temperature that you set. But what you can also do is edit all your sample names or edit your target temperature between 10 and 45 degrees Celsius. So this lets you get some very interesting data across different temperatures that we'll look at too. Once Honeybun is running your sample, then you also get to see your live video as samples flow through your bun. So you can confirm as this experiment runs what you might suspect about the viscosity of your sample. This kind of data is exactly what you get to see, and it's what's saved after a run of viscosity on Honeybun. So what we're looking at here is that video capture of 10 measurement channels, where the top sample is water, the second sample is 2 centipoise standard, and the third sample is 10 centipoise standard, and that pattern repeats down the rest of the bun. So you can see that the water, close to 1 centipoise at 25 degrees Celsius is running the fastest, and the 2 centipoise standard runs a little bit slower. The 10 centipoise standard runs a little bit slower than that. So tracking how fast those flow through the measurement channel is exactly what gets you the viscosity data that you need done on up to 10 samples at a time. With this kind of throughput, you can run any kind of concentration or formulation or different experimental condition that you want. Here we're looking at 10 samples run on a single Honeybun experiment, where it's a range of IgG concentrations from 0, which is pure buffer, all the way up to 75 milligram per mil, which is running at about 2 centipoise for this IgG. This is done in one simple experiment, so in about 5 minutes, we're getting our answers and we're ready to move on to the next part of our process. If you dig down into each of those viscosity data points, you get even more data. So because Honeybun is actually able to control your sample's flow with pressure, it can use a lot of different pressures in a very fast run to get a lot of different shear rates. In other words, apply a lot of pressure, your sample's going to flow very fast, and you're going to have a high shear rate. Apply lower pressure, your sample will flow a little bit lower, and you'll have a lower shear rate. So every time you run a viscosity experiment on Honeybun, you're also going to look at a lot of different shear rates, and that's going to tell you if your sample is Newtonian or non-Newtonian, which is really, really helpful when you understand the behavior of sample when you're running it through a bioprocess to make the antibody drug, or if you're trying to inject it into a patient. Honeybun also serves up viscosity data with high precision. So here we're looking at that same 0 to 75 milligram per mil IgG run. And now we're looking at it across 3 different buns. And you can see by the results table at the bottom, the average viscosity and the precision, which is less than Honeybun's 2% precision specification, even across different samples and all 10 of these different concentrations. I really like this data because it's the kind of thing where you can actually get precision data at 15, at all these different concentrations, where this would take lots and lots of time when run on old school instruments if you're doing this one at a time. Honeybun also allows you to control the temperature of your experimental run. So here we're looking at a simple 50 milligram per mil IgG sample where we've run it at 4 different temperatures. Each temperature would be a single experiment. So this is the result of 4 experiments running from 10 to 25 degrees Celsius to get the idea of the trend, which is going to almost always be as temperature increases, your viscosity will decrease. But where Honeybun really excels is the ability to do these temperature sweeps across all 10 samples at the same time. So now in this experiment, it's really the results from 4 quick runs on Honeybun at 4 temperatures, but we're checking out both IgG concentration and temperature and getting precise viscosity data at all of those points. So even in the highest concentration sample at the coldest temperature in the top right, we're still running triplicate samples and getting an excellent precision that gives us confidence in that viscosity data point. So with all of that speed and throughput, we really hope that you can get your viscosity groove on and nothing standing in your way. With that, I will pause and see what questions we got.
Great, Kevin. Thanks for introducing us to Honeybun. I noticed you were laughing a few times with some of the headlines, right? I mean, they kind of make us hungry or think about Honeybuns in a different in a different light. But thanks for talking about Honeybun, how it works, and how it measures viscosity just a lot easier than other techniques. For any of you out there with us that have had to deal with syringe-based systems or rolling ball systems and things like that, they just take a long time, and they're messy, require cleanup, they can clog. And I think what we've done here with Honeybun is just build a technology that just makes this application that's critical for making these therapeutics injectable just a lot easier to do. So thanks for taking us through that, Kevin. There are some questions already in the queue, so let's go ahead and hit those. Kevin, the first one is, what's the range of viscosity that can be measured on Honeybun?
The range of viscosity on Honeybun is between 1/2 centipoise and 150 centipoise. So that's perfect for biologic samples where you're going to typically see something, less than 10. And then when you get above limits like 20 or 50 centipoise, you know that you're going to have to go back and reformulate. So it's designed specifically to work for those antibody drugs and those biologics customers.
Okay, perfect. Next one, a question about the bun consumable. Are they reusable? Can people rerun the same channel? Can they use a couple channels and then run another one another day? How does that work?
Each channel is one-time use, but you can use one channel one day and come back the next day to use the others. So you'd never have to worry about chips clogging or cleaning up afterwards, because each channel is kind of a consumable by itself.
Okay. Kevin, is there any possibility of using even less volume than the current volume requirements?
So that's something that we've definitely heard from our customers is 40 microliters is great. I want to go as low as possible. So we're taking that feedback in and seeing what we can do.
Okay. And then what's the upper viscosity limit, Kevin, for Honeybun? What can it handle on the high end?
So 150 centipoise is the upper limit.
Okay. And then a follow-up question that's tied to that one. How long does it take to do 1 centipoise versus 150 centipoise samples? What are we commonly seeing?
For a 1 centipoise sample, that takes about a minute. If you're running at a different temperature, you'll add in a 30-second incubation time, but really, really fast. For a 150 centipoise sample, that will take about 10 minutes.
Okay. And then here's another one just about the instrument and running it. You said Honeybun runs based on compressed gas. Like, what kind of gas supply does somebody need to use the system?
Honeybun works great with nitrogen from a house supply or a tank. It doesn't consume much volume, so the tank will typically last a while. If you're using compressed air, we have a certain quality spec that we can share with you to make sure that gas is free of dust, water, and particles. And both of those work well.
Okay. And then Kevin, I'm going to tie two of these questions together. First, like what is shear rate really good for? Like, what does it help somebody measure? And then, the shear rate range for us, does it typically cover, common 1,000, like basically 1,000 S-1? What's the range for it? And is it kind of in the common range?
So for what shear rate it's good for, it's helpful to understand if you have Newtonian or non-Newtonian samples. You need to do a range of shear rates to get that understood. So if you're trying to inject a non-Newtonian sample, for example, that viscosity could increase or decrease as your injection force increases. So if it increases, you got a big problem. If it decreases, you've built a really nice formulation. So looking at a range of shear rates helps to characterize that. In terms of the range of shear rates that's delivered by Honeybun, so that will depend on the viscosity of your actual sample. And so if we look at specific viscosities, I can give you more specific details on what range you get in seconds.
Okay. And then Kevin, what's the available temperature range on the system? What typical temperature range do we have, and what are people commonly doing?
So the temperature range is between 10 to 45 degrees Celsius. When you're doing a lot of screening, the what we've seen out there in the field is a lot of customers are running 20 or 25 degrees Celsius as your standard screening temperature. And then you might want to run one temperature also at a colder data point, so you understand the trends in these different formulations as they go to cooler temperatures.
Okay. And there are a couple of questions in here with regards to shear rates at certain ranges of centipoise values. Kevin, I think we'll take those questions offline, because that's something we need to go look at specific samples to be able to answer those questions directly. So I'm not going to throw those at you and have you tell me we'll answer them later. We'll follow up with the person who asked that. Okay, so
yeah,
using less or more volume cause any issues with the system, Kevin, or are we recommending people use just a specific volume to run the sample? Right.
So we're recommending 40 microliters. That's what we've characterized and validated the instrument to work best with. And if you have a more specific need, we can have that conversation and figure out what we can do to help you out in the future.
Yeah. Okay. And then one more on shear rates, Kevin. I think, and if this depends on the viscosity of the sample and the shear rate range for those samples, again, we can take those questions offline. But do we have kind of a specified shear rate limits at different viscosities, or does it basically when the viscosities are different, so the shear rates limits different?
So once you start getting above, say, 2 centipoise, what you'll see in all microfluidic systems is both the maximum and minimum shear rate range will, go down. So you kind of have this sort of sloping range as you go up in centipoise. So say something in the order of 10 centipoise, we'll have something more like in the high hundreds or low thousands of that maximum minimum shear rate sweep. So that's why you've really got to look at your viscosity and then kind of look across to see what your shear rate range will be. And then it's really easy to get into specifics once you know that viscosity number.
Okay. There are a couple people, they've made it clear who they are by not doing anonymous. So Kevin, I think we'll follow up with the two of you that asked about the shear rate ranges based on certain samples and viscosities. We'll follow up with you guys directly on those. Because again, I think it's something where we need to go look at data sets and get back to you on that in specific detail rather than guessing. So we'll follow up with those directly. Okay. And then Kevin, somebody did ask about the high end, in development or kind of manufacturing settings, some samples may go over 100 centipoise. Is that the maximum of the system? Can people try to push that limit, or do we not recommend that?
So we've picked 150 centipoise because it's something that we can develop to and validate. And as we take in more feedback from customers, I think it's something that we can look at and probably examine on just the software end of things. So that's kind of the nice part about Honeybun is we've scoped out this application area that I think will really solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. And then beyond that, we might be able to change some things just on the software end of things with future releases.
Yeah. Okay. And then Kevin, the data and plots that you discussed, can we make those available? I think we can make this entire presentation obviously available to anyone. So we'd be happy to share that. That was the last question in the queue right here. So with that, I think any of the questions on shear rates, again, we'll follow up with the folks that asked about that. I appreciate everybody joining us today and the questions asked about the system. If there's anything you didn't get answered or you want to follow up with us about, we'll reach out to you. You can reach out to us. All you have to do is go over to our website and put in an inquiry just at unchainedlabs.com. And we'll be happy to talk to you more about Honeybun and how it measures viscosity. So thanks, Kevin. Great presentation, and talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.